first of all, I was pulled into this comedy competition and I was just like pulled into the industry faster than I probably deserved out of necessity. But it was a weird baptism of fire because there was no open mic scene there. The club was so cheap, they decided to not book an opener. So he told me I was doing 20 minutes opening for whoever the hell it was. I can't even remember, some British comic that they flew over. So my first gig was 20 minutes in Cork
Wow.
City. I mean, I'm sure there was a decent four or five in there. A lot of it was rubbish, but I didn't die. Had I died, I don't think I would have been dying to come back. But my only memory from that was I couldn't wait to do it again.
Hey everyone, welcome to How Success Happens. I'm Dan Bova, writer and editor at entrepreneur.com. I've spoken to a lot of people on the show who encourage entrepreneurs to get out of their comfort zone and get out there and find new opportunities. Well, today's guest has taken that, in my opinion, to some extreme levels, but we will get into that. Des Bishop is a very funny comedian from New York City, or from Ireland, or from China. It kind of depends on the moment we're talking about. And we'll explain that in a minute. His seventh stand-up special, Bridge and Tunnel, is streaming now on Hulu and YouTube. And I watched it. And as a gray-haired man, I can confidently say that I have never felt so seen in my entire life. Welcome, Des.
Oh, it's great to be here. As Silver Foxes, it's our moment.
Yeah, it is. Very, very funny special, and I encourage everyone to go see it. But my word, it's your seventh. How long does it take you to build up an hour's worth of material?
I mean, it really depends. Now, truth be told, a lot of those specials were in Ireland, where I've been doing comedy since 1997. And I'm going to rat myself out here and say that some of the jokes from my last two specials, which I consider my American, specials that were recorded in America, but also the material was developed in American stand-up comedy clubs. Uh, some of those jokes are improved versions of jokes that I had on previous Irish specials. So,
Got it.
I don't want to. Seven sounds, because the funny thing is, I think I counted it wrong. Later on, after the publicity went out, I realized I've actually done eight. But
Oh,
the-
okay.
but that's from a very long Irish comedy career. I consider my American comedy career to be kind of like a separate entity, and that's
Okay.
really something that's over. I get kind of like the last decade. Uh, I would both of those specials are on YouTube now. I would stand. I would tell anybody in America to watch them. I'd be pretty confident they would enjoy it. However, I wouldn't have told anybody in America to watch, say, my third comedy special, which was about me learning the Irish language. It's just niche. Actually, that was my
You're right.
fourth. I'm so bad at counting. My fourth comedy special. A lot about learning the Irish language. I mean, I think they would find it interesting the way that a TED Talk is interesting, but I don't know, would they get the jokes?
Right, right. Okay. Well, maybe you can bust out some Irish as we go along here, but
That's
but
no
let's
problem.
talk. Let's talk about the Irish of it all, because you've
Okay.
had a pretty interesting childhood. You're born in Queens, and then you're shipped out to go to high school in Ireland. So, can you talk a little bit about how that all came about, and did you instantly adapt, or did it take some doing before you felt you found your place?
Yeah. When I was 14, I mean, I had all sorts of stuff. I didn't have the greatest adolescence, to be honest with you. And I had all sorts of angst going on, and I was a little too fond of the booze because I started drinking quite young. And, I got kicked out of school, and my mother was quite stressed, and not to mention, by the way, from a long line of alcoholics. Our parents were alcoholics. My mother had stopped drinking. My dad had stopped drinking. Just a lot of alcoholism in our family. And my mother had the paranoia of somebody who'd stopped drinking because they drank too much, but more importantly, somebody who was raised by people who drank too much and had a lot of stress about that. And she was immediately alarmed, that by the time I was 14, I was already getting quite a lot of trouble related to booze. And so I was also quite like not happy. I was like not didn't like the school I was in. I was falling out with everybody. I was getting bullied a little bit. And a cousin of mine, in the midst of all this chaos, was visiting from Ireland, and she suggested, "Did you ever think about going to boarding school in Ireland?" And I just thought this was the coolest idea ever. I said it to my parents. My mother now didn't take it that seriously, but she did allow my cousin to talk to her dad. And well, 6 weeks later, I was going to Ireland. So it was that
Wow.
random. It literally was
Wow.
that random. And uh, I mean, it was the best thing I ever did. Certainly for my education. I would think for me as a person, it was the best thing I ever did. In answer to the last part of your question, did I find it hard to fit in? I actually didn't. I found my freshman year of high school in New York and St. Francis Prep in Fresh Meadows, Queens, very hard, actually.
So you're in Ireland, you feel comfortable there. When do you remember the decision, or was it a gradual thing that said, "You know what? I'm going to be a comedian."
Well, it was a little bit to chance. So I stopped drinking when I was 19. That was all very much my adolescence was very chaotic, emotionally and all that. And then I nipped it in the bud in 1995. And like essentially was kind of almost like starting over at life. But I was in college. I'd already done 1 year of college, which was an absolute disaster. I had to do that year over. so,
Okay.
so I
Well,
was
it's
back
free.
in,
Why not?
yeah, I was back in freshman year of college. Well, actually, the repeat isn't free because like it's not as free. You got to perform.
Okay.
So anyway, to repeat, you didn't get for free. Anyway, but I had already even in my sort of haze of my first freshman year in college, where I was really struggling. I had already established myself in the drama society. So then when I got sober, I didn't take I still even in sobriety didn't take my studies that seriously, but I took the drama society quite seriously. And I think that was the beginning of me just thinking about, you know, performance, but I wasn't really thinking about it as a career because I wasn't even thinking about a career. But then a guy actually from recovery, he was a host of a comedy club in Cork City where I was in college, and he started like getting us free tickets every Wednesday. So we would go every Wednesday to this club, and it was fun. And I kept getting up for this. They used to have a joke competition at the end, which was just a joke, like Irishman, Englishman, a Scotsman walk into a bar type thing. But I kept getting up, and he kept saying to me, I really think you should try stand up. And honestly, I thought it was too arrogant to think that you could do that. I actually thought, like, who am I to think that I could do that? And then one day I got up for the joke competition and something had occurred to me in the bathroom, like something random happened. And instead of just telling my joke, I first began saying, like, oh, this thing just happened to me. And then I did my joke. And he was like, listen, in 2 weeks, you're doing a spot because you're basically doing it already. So it's happening. So he gave me 2 weeks, but it was a weird baptism of fire because there was no open mic scene there.
Mm.
And the club was so cheap, they decided to not book an opener. So he told me I was doing 20 minutes opening for whoever the hell it was. I can't even remember, some British comic that they flew over. And so my first gig was 20 minutes in Cork
Wow.
City. I mean, I'm sure there was a decent 4 or 5 in there. A lot of it was rubbish, but I didn't die. Had I died, I don't think I would have been dying to come back. But my only memory from that was I couldn't wait to do it again. And then I knew, that I would do it.
Did you have confidence that, like, "Hey, I know I can make people laugh when we're just hanging out," like, this were you nervous, I guess, is what I'm
Well,
asking?
I mean, I was definitely nervous doing the gig, 100%. Um, and like all those early goes or early shows were full of nerves. And like, we all still get nerves every time we get on stage to a degree. But in terms of like thinking I could do it as a job, I didn't really, you know, I didn't think that much about it, but because Ireland was small, the comedy scene was small, but it was kind of an exciting time in Irish comedy. There was a sitcom called Father Ted that was huge on British television, but it was Irish, written by Irish guys, Irish actors. And as a result, there was suddenly just a huge focus on Ireland, particularly Irish comedy, but there wasn't a hell of a lot of comedians. So very early on, because I showed like immediate promise, because I guess whatever about the material, I did have stage presence, like a natural charisma on stage that by the way, I didn't think that about myself. This is things were being said to me. And very quickly I was kind of pulled into first of all, I was pulled into this comedy competition and I was just like pulled into the industry faster than I probably deserved out of necessity. So the first summer, which was the summer of 1997, I actually went up to Dublin for the summer because like I was getting all these opportunities. So by the end of the summer of 1997, because I had been asked to be like the MC of the Rocky Horror Picture Show midnight at the Olympia. It's a very long, it was a live show, and I was getting paid. I was actually getting paid, so I like made money like a little bit, kind of quick. So suddenly, I
Yeah.
really did get a flavor that like this is something that I could do in a way that I think was a little bit unnatural. Was just a little bit of like lucky timing,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
and it gave me the belief that there was a chance.
So talk to me about the show you did where you traveled around Ireland and you worked a series of low wage jobs. What led to that? What gave you the idea from it for it, and what did it turn out differently than what you thought going into it?
Yeah, I mean, that was 2003 when we filmed it, 2004 when it was on TV. So the idea came from somebody who had just moved over from British television to Irish TV, and she was the head of development in RT comedy. She was Canadian though, and she said, "I've been holding on to this idea, waiting for the right person to pitch it to." Uh, and she asked me, had I read the book Nickel and Dimed by Barbara Ehrenreich? And coincidentally enough, I had. It was just a funny coincidence because I'm not like a big reader, but I had
Okay.
read that book. And Barbara Ehrenreich, American journalist, had gone undercover in the United States, working minimum wage jobs to see, was it a livable wage? But she was undercover and she was able to really give a good expose on the difficulties of affordability at that time in America, particularly around healthcare. And, there was these were big corporate employers and employing people that were really struggling to get by. So I said I had read it, and she said she wanted to do a TV version of that. But however, we would have to get permission to film. It wouldn't be undercover. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. Uh, so how it ended up being different was, so the first job that I did was in a kebab shop in Waterford called Abracababra. And I thought it was going to be a show about like affordability, but actually, it really became a job about that, particularly that episode, which was really the episode that kicked the whole thing into the stratosphere. It became a job about how badly low wage workers are treated, especially because that was the beginning of immigration to Ireland. So Ireland was in the midst of the Celtic Tiger, which was an economic boom, which I think was a positive for Ireland. And people sort of look back on that time a little bit with negativity because of the global economic crisis that came afterwards. But there was so much positive about it. And one of them was that Ireland had, multiculturalism for the first time. And I was working with all these Chinese workers. And honestly, they had a great attitude about their job. The wages were low, but they were there with a mission. But the work was tough and they were treated like crap. And drunken people were treating all of us like crap. And we got it on camera. And not everybody loved that show. It was a huge success because it was very controversial, but it was a little bit of a mirror to a sort of a modern Ireland that perhaps Irish people, because Irish people saw themselves as the exporter of people, right? And Irish people go around the world and everyone loves the Irish, which is true and it's deserved. There's nothing negative about anything I'm talking about, other than, some of these new people to Ireland were getting treated bad. And it came across on the show and it was pretty hard hitting and I was pretty moody and I was not holding back. And it hit a nerve. And then the fourth one was in a supermarket where I was actually getting a bit more than minimum wage. And we actually kind of talked about like in jobs where you feel like you have a bit of upward mobility. And it was quite positive, actually. Like the show was not a hit piece on the minimum wage. It was very honest. And the
Mm,
things that were tough, we showed that were tough. And the things that were maybe like not as tough as people might think, we showed. And also, obviously, we had to point out that like the second job was in a leisure center, like where it was an indoor water park.
okay.
And, a lot of the staff were teenagers and people that were just looking for extra money. And, we didn't, other than like I had to go to the doctor that time, but like we didn't focus that much on the money. We focused more on just like how
Mhm.
certain jobs are quite menial. But also because water parks are kind of fun, that episode was just kind of funny, you
Right,
know?
right.
And, but also each episode had a theme or like things that we sort of focused on.
Yeah. So you mentioned working with Chinese coworkers. Let's talk about China because as a person who barely made it through Intro to Italian in college, like the fact that you were able to learn Mandarin uh, blows my mind. Can you talk about that experience? What
Sure.
brought that on?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that I was never good at languages in school either. So there's this kind of
Mm,
like misinformation out there that somehow I was good at languages. No, I found I was put into language learning situations that were infinitely better than the language learning situation you get put in school and college for that matter. Learning languages to be examined is actually like a very poor way because languages are about communication, not about results, right? So anyway, uh, the China thing was an evolution of the third series I made for Irish TV was about learning the Irish language, which was a very successful series. And but it was an experience that everyone in Ireland has because the Irish language is a compulsory subject in Irish school. So you're making a series about an experience that most of the country have had. So it's very easy to make a series like that. It's very Irish. I was already well known in Ireland. So, but the China thing was my own personal fascination with China, uh, it, various aspects of why that was. But the one that's relevant to what you just brought up is the people that I worked with in Waterford and Abercrombie in that first series, particularly one of them remained like a very close friend of mine. And I had visited him in China, visited his family, and I'd seen how unique China was as a country. And being around them and also growing up in Flushing, Queens, which became very Chinese Mandarin speaking in my lifetime, I really had a bug to learn Mandarin. And after the Irish language experience, where I was quite adept at learning the language in a short space of time, I decided that the next version of that idea would be to learn Mandarin because it was 2008. The Beijing Olympics was about to happen, and the world was quite obsessed with China, but it was a very sort of like narrow story of political, trouble or political criticism and economic, fascination with their rise, right? So I wanted to tell the story of the Chinese people, particularly through the journey of can a man learn enough Mandarin to make the people laugh in their own language? So that was the goal, same as the Irish
Yeah.
language one. And but it took 5 years to get it off the ground because like it wasn't as easy a pitch as the Irish language to Irish TV. And then
Right, right,
anywhere
right.
else in the world, I wasn't famous. So nobody else was looking to pick it up. So it really took me a long time to get somebody to back it. Uh,
Uh-huh.
so I didn't actually go there until 2013. So 2013, we started making Break in China, which was a 1 year immersion experience of living in China with a family and doing everything you could possibly do to learn enough to do stand up. And I mean, we did it, but also I think we made like a good 6 episode series about the China of that time. And we got lucky with the fact that stand up comedy as we know it, Western style stand up, which they call toko show, because they alliterate from talk show. They don't they don't alliterate from stand up comedy. They alliterate from talk show. So they call it toko show. Is Western stand up as we know it was like kind of brand new there, and I happened to be there right at the beginning of this like nascent stand up comedy scene that then has really blown up in the meantime, and actually made it way more complicated because when I did the series, everybody in the West, particularly like Western media, wanted to talk to me about censorship and like well you can't say anything there, which of course was very valid and I had no problem talking about it, but it wasn't that relevant in our experience because most of the stuff we did was small under the radar and like not official. So there was like not a lot of censorship because it was very low key, nobody cared. But in the meantime, it's become huge. And as a result, it's very censored. It's very complicated. There's a lot of money in it. All these companies are involved. And it's very different to the Western stand up comedy scene. I can't explain it to you. I don't quite understand. But it's just would have been a very different
Right,
experience
right.
had I done it today.
Is there is there a joke in Chinese that you remember that's a quick joke you could tell us in Chinese
In
and then
Chinese, no.
in
I
the
mean,
translated?
honestly, no. I mean, obviously, I have my bits that I used to do in Chinese, but none of them translate great. Like translation, people always think, sense of humor stuff is like, oh, it's different countries. I think there's less variation on humor than people think, but
Mm,
there's just a lot of issues around translation.
yeah.
And obviously there's issues around cultural references that people wouldn't get, you know? And I always say to people, I could go, I mean, I did a lot because I stayed another year. I liked my experience in China so much that the second year we weren't making a TV show, but I just stayed there. And I just changed from being somebody who was living in China to make a documentary to a comedian that lives in China but travels around the world and does comedy with Beijing as my base. Because I just wanted to keep doing stand up in Mandarin. I wanted to keep learning the language. I wasn't really ready to say goodbye to all these new friends that I made. So, anyway, particularly in my second year, I could go up on stage in Mandarin and kill. And I would watch the rest of the comedians on stage and not understand a word they said.
Really?
Not, and certainly, even when I understood what they said, very, very rarely would I get the joke, you
Oh,
know?
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
because I knew how to convert my own thoughts into humor, but
Yeah.
my language level was like, obviously the Chinese people in the audience could hear my basic Mandarin and I could articulate myself in a way that was funny. But my Mandarin was still pretty basic. My head is taking in all this very complicated Mandarin at a rapid pace that these other comedians are saying. I just couldn't, I didn't know what they're
Yeah.
saying. And then even towards the end, when my Mandarin was a lot better and I could understand almost every word, more often than not, I either didn't understand the word of the punchline or I certainly didn't know why it was funny. You
Okay.
know, it
Yeah.
was related to some cultural thing, some
Right.
comparison, or like even
Yeah.
some event that I wasn't aware of, like something from the 80s or the 90s, you know?
Yeah, right, right,
Um, and then wordplay stuff that like I wouldn't, I just didn't
right.
get the language, tight enough.
Yeah. But so I'm amazed because as you talked about a little bit in the beginning there, so you've had like three like very distinct audiences, like the Irish audience, then the Chinese audience. Building an audience
Mm.
is not an easy thing. A lot of people try, a lot of people fail at it. What do you think has been your key to success with connecting with these very different audiences?
Well, part of it is that I've been good at being a fish out of water, particularly with the Irish and the Chinese thing. But that's a blessing and a curse, because like in Ireland, I got quite well known quite fast by having these killer bits about being this guy that came to Ireland and saw Ireland through my unique eyes, my point of view, which was very fresh and fun for Irish people, but virtually meaningless outside of Ireland, which is actually a small country. The island, the entire island without a border, is, I think it's 7.5 million people today. It wasn't even that much when I started doing
Mm,
comedy.
yeah.
It's less than the five boroughs of New York City. So like, it's quite a limited,
Yeah.
a limited group of people. And then, well, obviously the Chinese stuff was limited, except that there's 1.4 billion of them. But I wasn't going to be there long enough to break out in a way that to become like a Chinese superstar. It was really honestly, I mean, I've done plenty of international stuff, particularly after 2008. I really sort of made it. 2008, I was doing comedy 11 years, and I just was like, I need to do more stuff outside of Ireland. So from 2008 on, I really had focused on becoming a bit more of an international comedian where the kind of borders are less relevant. But particularly after I finished in China, where I'd had this not just Chinese language experience, but I also had the experience of English performing to people from all over the world that were living in China for various reasons. And they were connecting very hard with what I was doing. And I just was like, you know what? I need to break out of what I would consider the sort of limited type of material that I'd been doing throughout my career. So really since then, kind of like a decade, 11-year journey, since then I've just made it my business to just uh, be more international. But particularly since 2015, thought I'd need to like be able to go anywhere in the United States and like murder, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that has been a fun thing to do, but it also did require me to step out of my comfort zone. In Ireland, I'm pretty well known. I'm touring like theaters and I'm doing my thing to like my fans. Uh, from when I started, particularly 2018, I set myself a goal. I said I'm not gonna live off any money that I make outside of the United States. I didn't move back to the United States full time, but in 2018, I decided to like spend more time here and like basically force myself to like try to make more, just like I needed the pressure of like having to do it. Uh and it was a great exercise, but it was not easy. I performed to like tiny crowds and cities of people no idea who I was, but it did make me like a way better stand-up comedian, as well as going to the New York comedy clubs a lot and like having to sort of like do really well on these like incredibly strong bills. They were all just challenges that perhaps I hadn't faced. in my career, but particularly like I just hadn't been forced creatively to up my game as much as I did during that, during that period of time. But it has really stood to me in terms of like how I feel as a performer.
You talked about nerves, that we all have nerves. Also, I mean, when you step on stage, you're putting a lot out there. You're telling jokes. Not all of them land. What's your relationship with risk and failure, and knowing that not every joke is gonna be, dynamite out of the gate? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's a bigger thing for people looking in rather than in the experience, because I think, well, it's a known fact that the like the number one greatest fear is public speaking, I believe. Well, I mean, I don't know, like I see these lists and like fear of public speaking tends to be number one. It's certainly up there on like the top five things that people fear. Uh, but I never feared that. So like that's not my fear is not having the opportunity to to be public speaking. Like I
Got
love performing,
right.
I
Okay.
I
Yeah.
literally I'm the opposite. Like without an audience, like what's the point in fucking talking? That's the way. By the way, I'm joking, but I am saying that it is part of my personality. It always has been.
Yeah.
So and then the risk taking in terms of like jokes not landing, particularly as you get more experienced as a comedian, like that's just the occupational hazard of needing new material.
Hmm.
So the time where that happens the most is when you're developing new bits, but it's kind of like one of those things where you have no choice. You like so I think the risk taking is more in you know, like taking risks with ideas, uh, taking on endeavors where you're not sure they're going to succeed in terms of like the type of TV show. Um, I mean, it's a nice little tidy metaphor to be like, I took a risk, I got on stage and I said this thing. But I think for me personally, and I think for a lot of comics, it would be more like the risks of maybe the type of topics. Like, am I ready to take the heat for having strong opinions on a particular topic, or and I don't these days that's even more complicated than it used to be, but I mean that more the evergreen thing of decisions on the type of stuff you want to talk about. I consider that to be more the risk taking rather than like, oh, this joke might not land you
Right.
know
Right. 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 Of course. So, well, talk to me a little bit about your relationship with your audience on social media, because you've got quite a big following. Besides posting funny bits from your stand-up routines, how have you kind of nurtured your audience of people who really are fiending to see what you're going to do next, and want to be a part of it?
Well, I'm sure you're probably aware that that has been the greatest evolution in the industry that I know, stand up comedy, since I started doing stand up. Because in the early part of my career, it was actually quite a sort of like, well, there wasn't one path, but there was a certain amount of paths and they were very clearly defined, which is you do as many gigs as you can, you get better, and then you start to hope that you can find yourself in performances that really matter, like high profile showcase performances, that you might get cast in something and get some notoriety that way, or you might get booked to be on like in the UK and Ireland, for example, like panel shows. But basically, like there was just ways to notoriety, which were essentially film and television. And I don't like the term gatekeepers, but there was because sometimes gatekeeper sounds negative, but I would say it's a positives and negatives because a lot of people that used to sort of like control the entry to notoriety had better taste than the algorithm.
Right.
That
Right. Okay.
sometimes I feel like the algorithm is not that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
savvy. But anyway, uh, but the negative of that was that it was quite limited and it's quite open for corruption, right? Because then it's like networkers perhaps had a better advantage or just none
Yeah.
of this
Yeah.
stuff is
Yeah.
controversial, by the way. I'm just saying it was different.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Of course.
it was clearly defined and it was more obvious. And the internet, particularly social media, particularly the last 10 years, that has completely changed. And it became about content. And, you know, like a lot of comics my age, I resisted. I railed against the dying of the light uh, for a while and just felt that like, oh, my bits, I don't want to burn my bits and all these things that comics say, which is totally it's valid, but it's pointless because you're basically saying that you don't want to move into the modern age and you're basically saying that you're just on a slow journey to retirement because this is the way the game is. Everyone's on their phone and that's where TV is. TV
Right.
is dead, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
to a degree, right? So anyway,
Yeah.
long
Yeah.
story short, that has been a huge change. And even though I've always been, particularly by like Irish comics, I've always been considered to be somebody who was like open-minded to whatever the next thing is. I was never particularly good at it though, in terms of like social media content, you know? And even before I met my wife's very good at it. But even before I met my wife, I had a few goes at like trying to just like post clips. And then even when I met my wife originally, she would always be on to me about posting clips. And I would have times where I would post them, but I really did never get like I never got the algorithm on my side, you know? So
Mm,
I would often get quite frustrated. And I'd be just like, well, I'm
yeah.
posting loads of shit. It's not going anywhere. And it's really time consuming. And I'm not an editor. And you know, all these things that I just found it quite tedious and not enjoyable. And then I got lucky and some of them clicked. And then after that, it gets a lot easier. And that's pretty satisfying.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Well, I mean, geez, just your Instagram alone is like,
Yeah, but that's only the last 2 years. That's the
oh,
thing.
okay.
But it has
Yeah.
really, it is really, I mean, here's the crazy thing. Like, it's absolutely changed my career, like immensely. And
Mm,
the pain that I went through in 2003, living on minimum wage and the fucking torture, like that was 4 months living on minimum wage. And we got 4 40-minute episodes out of that, right? Which is
right.
actually a small amount of content, required loads of people making it. And by the way, it did totally change my life. But I also posted a clip about mindfulness or like a joke with the term mindfulness on it. And it got 14 million views on my account. It got 20 million views on some random dude that posted it. And then, you know, various people post it all the time. It probably has like 100 million views.
Right. Right. Right.
Nothing I've done has come even close to that. And it's a
Right. Right.
quick, simple stand up bit that didn't actually require a lot of effort. And like, I would
Yeah.
say that that's a positive, you know, that
Yeah.
that can
Yeah.
happen. So, all in all, I would say the evolution of the industry has been a positive because it's slightly more. I mean, I don't know if it's not a meritocracy because the algorithm is odd, but it's certainly it's less about hoping the right person gives you the pass, you know, the golden ticket. And it's more about can that algorithm put it out there enough for people to be like, this is hilarious. I want more of this.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. Awesome. Well, I want to finish things off with something new that we're trying. So you're a guinea pig here.
Okay, no problem.
All right. So I'm gonna give very popular on entrepreneur content is side hustles, job, side jobs, things like that. And so these I'm gonna ask you, I'm gonna give you 5 jobs and I'm going to ask you to rank them, one as the highest, five as the lowest. But I'm not going to tell you, you have to pick the rank. You have to force rank them as I say them. Here we go. First one, fast food consultant.
A fast food consultant. Uh, four.
Four. Okay. So putting that a little bit on the low list. So not
But
your
I'm leaving
thing.
myself a little space.
Okay, all right. Just being smart here, people.
Well, I don't know.
Uh
Three probably would have been the smartest, but let's see where we go.
lifeguard.
Oh, three.
Three. Okay.
I probably should have put that. I'll stick with three.
You can't change. I'm
Yeah.
writing
Okay.
it down as
Okay.
indelible ink.
No
Uh,
problem.
translator.
Oh, translator numero uno.
All right. Do you ever? Did you ever? Well, I don't want to tell
Oh,
one of
actually,
your
can I just
jokes.
say one thing about translator? Number one for me, however, probably a job that's going to be obsolete very soon,
Yeah, that's true.
for the record.
That's true for the record.
So that's a personal choice, but probably not a smart one because I actually think it's a job that's under threat
Okay.
by AI and simple translation. Just in case anyone wasn't sure why, but I'm pretty sure your audience knows what I was talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, next one is sorry, we just did that. Next one is dance instructor.
Oh, number 2. Probably would have put that if I had the opportunity, I probably would have put that as number 1, but absolutely number 2.
All right.
Most fun I've
Okay.
ever had in my career, Dance with the Stars Ireland. Best
And then
experience of my life, despite the fact that I only made it halfway, but I absolutely loved doing every second of it.
that's great. Do you bust out the moves on the
Wow.
weekends?
My knee's not in great shape, so no.
Okay. And finally, there's only one spot left. Hair club for men's spokesman.
Oh, well, it's gotta be 5,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm not only the hair club president, I'm also a client, but the hair club for men was always about losing your hair. So I wouldn't even be a good one.
Oh, right. You know what? I totally fucked that up. I meant to
No, it's
say
fine, it's fine. It's why it's number 5. It's fine. You have to live with it. You can't change it either, by the way.
I
You
can't
can't
change it
change it
either.
either. Would have been a just for men
Just for men. That's
just
what I
for
was
men.
thinking.
To be honest with you wanna know the truth? I well, one, I guess they wouldn't contact me because I'm embracing the gray, but I've actually been quite offended that, like, the purple shampoo companies or, like, Just for Men hasn't said, "Hey, would you think about dyeing it?" I feel like the influencing is a better game for women. I just feel sometimes that, like, there's a few areas of sort of male grooming that, I just haven't been contacted about, and I'm very disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if just for men, if you're listening,
Yeah, I'm
give
ready to
this man.
influence.
Yeah, give this man. And if you are listening to this and want to know why we're talking about that, I highly suggest you check out Des Bishop's Bridge and Tunnel special, which you can stream now on Hulu and YouTube.
YouTube, where it's
Awesome,
all
man.
at.